Hi everyone, my name is Ray, or some of you might know me as Tiki with Ray, and today we just got done watching we finally got to see the Donn of Tiki. And you were a Patreon, what is it, a Patreon? You did part of the Kickstarter?
It was a Kickstarter, yeah.
And I guess the whole thing is like if you're a Kickstarter of this movie that you get to get a pre-showing of it. Like they sent you a link and then you get to watch it. Only for like 2 days though.
Yeah, but that's all right. I mean, you got to watch it, and yeah, they had a 1 month window, and when you click on the service, you have 48 hours to watch, which was cool. That's fine. It took us, a few of us, myself included, were a little antsy because we had contributed a little bit of money, and the producers of the show realized that they wouldn't necessarily get all the awards or be eligible for certain film circuits if they had already distributed it to people. So they were delaying distribution. So even though we were promised to be the first, I know a number of people viewing have seen it in San Francisco, in Florida, and it's been airing out there. And on social media, a few of our friends who have seen it, and who are probably watching this, gave it really thumbs up reviews. I haven't read a long review of it, so I was really eager to see it. We got the link, we were able to watch it, and has Tiki Goth Club Critic at Large thumbs up?
Yeah. Okay, that's the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching. Well, I think Stephen, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the documentary, I think we need to talk about the Sunny Sun book first, or at least a little bit briefly, because we did a video on that book, and the thing that really stood out in that book was how short of time Don Beach's story is in that. Yeah. You know, she meets Don. You know, at that point he had like the one Don the Beachcomber location. Then they moved across the street, and then by the time they started working on Chicago, he wasn't even part of the chain anymore. He was He was hired on as an advisor.
Yeah.
Of his own restaurant chain, and you're like, and then that's it. And then
he sort of disappears. Comes back for Sunny Sun's funeral and a couple other little interactions, and that was it.
I mean, Don goes out to Hawaii, opens up his location out there, does the Internet Martian place. But as far as like the story of like the Don the Beachcomber restaurant chain going into like the 50s, the 60s, and like even the 70s, they're like, Don's not even part of it, and we're kind of like, what? And then they got divorced and everything, and you're like, well, what happened? What's going on here? And the main thing that we were looking for when we were waiting for this documentary, like, what are they gonna talk about that? What are they gonna say about this? Are they gonna shed a little bit more light into it? And I really think they did.
Oh, I did, and it's funny, both the book and the documentary, and I don't think you find this an apt comparison, but it reminds me of the movie Psycho. Because
no, I got you.
You're focused on the main character, right? And she's, going in the creepy house and all of that. And then suddenly, 25% or whatever percent into the movie, she's, the shower scene comes and then she's gone.
Yeah.
And I think I actually took a couple notes, but what was amazing when I watched the video is from about, say, 1931 to 1932 to about 39.
Yep.
So let's call it a 7-year period. That's just sort of rough.
Yeah.
That's when Don the Beachcomber made his mark to influence what we call Tiki, the beachcomber bars, the rum drinks that we all know and love. The whole influence of Don the Beachcomber mark is this 7-8 year period, which is just fascinating. And the documentary helps explain why he disappeared from the book, because the book follows Sunny Sun and Don the Beachcomber in the lower 48 states, has a going concern under Sunny Sun's leadership The movie follows Don the Beachcomber, his life, and follows him to Hawaii, where we can talk about this too, where he had a big influence on Hawaii tourist culture, which was a really interesting take. But that his influence, which is so profound, because he, along with Vic Bergeron, are really the godfathers who've influenced what is and isn't Polynesian pop, tiki, the whole 9 yards. His it was so small, was so in such a compact period of time. I guess I should say, not small. His influence was large, and this video helps explain that. To your point about why the book, he disappears so early in the book. In this documentary explains that to some degree, and we should also preview that I think in 2025. There's going to be a book that's going to come out
by Tim Glasner
and
Swanky Tim Swanky Tiki, and then he's the guy who wrote the Mai-Tai book. That, I mean, if you haven't read it, you really should read it like right now. And one thing is I said about this too is I remember reading about in the Mai-Tai how they got a lot of the bartenders that used to work at Donn the Beachcomber to come work at the Mai-Tai, and I'm like. And in the book, it's like a good thing. And I'm like, hold on. Were they poaching bartenders from Don Beach? And you realize, like, no. By that point, like, a lot of them were from the Chicago location. And, like, Don Beach wasn't part of that. It was Sunny Sun. Mm-hmm. And they didn't have ties to her. And the thing that we read in the book is, like she's kind of a drunk. Kind of had a drinking problem and anger problems and stuff like that. And she might have did a great job of managing the chain, but probably working underneath her was probably like a different story. So let's get to like the main point where this all changes, where the point of contention, and that's when Don Beach ends up in jail.
Yeah, and we talk about that in the Sunny Sun book as well.
Okay, so let's get right to that, because that's where things happen. You know, and until this point, is Don and Sunny married, or are they still just kind of dating?
I did not think they were. Or were they married? No.
I don't know if they are.
I don't think they were, as I recall.
But they obviously.
I look at my own notes. Of course, I can't read the writing.
But obviously, they were a couple to some extent.
Yeah.
Don ends up in jail, and he needs bail money to get out, and no one's helping him. He's calling all his friends. No one's helping him out. And then Sunny comes and says, I can get you the money. But if I can get you the money. What was her original arraignment? Was it 50-50?
Yeah. That's my understanding, is 50-50.
She would get 50-50 percentage of the company. And he did not want to do it. He didn't want to do it. I mean, for the record, that wasn't something that he wanted to do. But he was kind of in a rock and a hard place, and he did it.
Yep.
And then he gets out of jail, and it's all in writing, I guess, that yes, she now is half ownership of the Donn the Beachcomber chain. And then we start learning about that there's mob ties.
Yeah. Well, and the documentary does a good job of explaining the Raymond Beaumont Gant, i.e. Don Beach's brother, Hugh, had some mob connections in 1931, which was, I think, the same year he went to jail. Sunny Sun, who was or became his wife, Don's wife, got money from her sister to bail out Donn, and in consideration of the bail, said, you got to sign this agreement for 50-50, as you just said.
Yeah.
And so both the book and the movie go into that. What's going to be very interesting is, so the book, Sunny Sun's book, this is all sort of a part and parcel of three things. Sunny Sun's book explains sort of the mob connection and the Chicago Donn the Beach location. and that even that she had to get protection for herself when she was 12 years old, and hints at a lot of nasty stuff. The documentary shows that maybe through the brother and others there were some connections with the mob and financing, and there was some influence there, but leaves some questions unanswered. In fact, Ray and I, we had this theory that maybe the mob paid for the bail money, but in fact,
I reached out to Tim and he said no, it was from his sister. But there's one thing that's kind of weird is like they get to a point where like Donn essentially is literally like forced out of the Donn of Tiki. Then she come to him with like okay, you are literally signing over your rights to Donn of Tiki completely.
Well, in 1938 or thereabouts, they get a divorce.
Yep.
And interestingly, the documentary says he doesn't even show up for the court hearing himself. So she gets everything, meaning that Donn's 50% comes to her. In 1938, in the documentary, they have a visit to Hawaii, and something happens. It's unclear what happens, and as a result, or happens on that trip. But immediately thereafter, there's divorce proceedings. They get divorced.
Yep.
He doesn't even bother to show up for his own court hearings in the divorce proceeding. They get an annulment, and in the legal documents, she gets everything. So she had fit both, maybe by law back, but I don't know the divorce laws back then, but certainly by that agreement from the bail, she already had a 50% interest. His 50% interest, he essentially gives up. And the agreement says within the United States, but it was before Hawaii was a state, so we'll get to that in a minute. And therefore, she takes everything. By then, and the story in both the book and in the documentary, we're not going to give away everything in this because you really should see the documentary when it comes out. Hopefully, it'll hit a streaming service soon. She had already been able to sweet talk the inspector to getting the health occupancy or liquor license in her name anyway.
Yeah.
She had the business records in her name. What Tim had told you in the text, and this is why I say it's a three-parter. You have the Sunny Sun book.
Yeah.
You have the documentary, and what a hint of coming attractions. When the book comes out, it's going to probably go a little bit more in depth to some of the mystery of what happened in those divorce proceedings, because there were outside influences involved at that time. Because in the book, suddenly we leap to Chicago, and then the mob is full force, and you're kind of like, I'm kind of like pulling on threads, trying to figure out how the story unfolded. There's a lot of mystery in this era.
Well, even in the fact that that he was given a document to sign, like saying she's going to get full ownership of it, and he signed it. Yeah. Again, not because he wanted to, because it sounds like he was probably forced to do that. So she gets essentially full ownership of the Donn Beachcomber chain. And then in the documentary, as far as the chain is concerned, the story's kind of over. And then the documentary continues to follow Donn Beach's life. He goes to Hawaii. He opens up his Donn Beachcomber location. He opens up the international marketplace with the treehouse and all that other stuff. And it just continues and focuses on his life. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't. And what I find interesting is they don't even talk about the Donn Beachcomber restaurant chain at all throughout most of the documentary until the end.
Yeah.
And then they come back and they're like, well, eventually Sonny sold the rights to the Donn Beachcomber thing to like like some company or something like that, and then like by like, then she didn't even have anything to do with herself, and it was funny, like the whole like the Donn Beachcomber restaurant chain. The whole thing about it was like an afterthought.
Right. But it also explains why something I think we riffed on when we talked about the Sunny Sun book.
Yeah.
Why, unlike Trader Vic's, where there's one guy,
Yeah.
and there's a family, there are interests, there are franchises. You can trace the franchises. You can trace the owned restaurants. You can figure out where all the restaurants are. The Donn the Beach is so confused because Don Beach himself is out of the picture.
Yeah.
Sunny Sun takes over Palm Springs, I guess, Chicago, LA, and maybe one other. Then later on, I guess they lost the rights to the name, and now the restaurant group that Marie King and others are working with and working for in Florida is got the name rights.
Yeah.
And they're bringing it back. But there's this whole period between 1939 and even the 2000s where it was very confused. Like, with the Huntington Beach, Seal Beach location, I was always wondering, okay, what's the relationship of that place to the whole big corporation? And you looked it up.
Actually, not much at all. It was almost like an homage to the name. One thing that was really, really cool about the Donn Beachcomber movie is that they actually have a lot of audio footage where he's interviewed.
Yeah, primarily it looks like a very in-depth interview from the 80s or 90s.
Yeah, and it's great. And so how they did that and how they added that into the movies, they actually did was it an animation?
Yeah, so what they did is they took this interview or interviews, and since it was audio, you could tell the documentary filmmakers were sort of like noodling over what to do with it.
Yeah.
Because everything else follows sort of a classic document.
Yes.
And the production values are quite good. I was surprised how good they were. So what they decided to do is when Donn Beach is talking on these audio interviews, they did a claymation, a stop motion animation of Donn Beach telling his story as if he's sitting in. It looked like the McAdam Place, one of the two McAdam Place bars, because they had a little recreation of that. That was excellent.
In a peacock chair. Smoking a cigar.
Yep. And telling his story with the audio playing.
Yeah.
And then when he would make a recollection going back in time, him talking about his recollection, they had a great, and I'm sorry I didn't write down to credit who the cartoonist was.
Yeah.
They had a great cartoon clips. And what was great about it was the cartoon clips were mainly black and white, sort of like Popeye,
like early Disney,
or early, but it
like
was
Steamboat Willie.
It reflected the year about the recollection. So if he's talking about the 1932, it would reflect whether it was Tom and Jerry or Betty Boop, but that sort of black and white cartoon of the events he's describing. And then when he was talking about World War II, it became colorized, but kind of the 1940s kind of
Bugs
garish
Bunny-ish.
and washed out, colors. They did an amazing job of incorporating the stop motion animation and the cartoon animation into telling the audio story instead of in the courtroom dramas or murder mysteries where they type the transcript out, and then they have the grainy picture of the witness or whatever. So they defied convention, their documentary convention, and I saw that in the previews. And to be honest, in the previews, I was a little skeptical about how that would work, but they pulled it off brilliantly. Yeah. It was fun to watch, the cartoons especially. It was really well done, kudos to everyone who put the documentary together for making something that come to life even better, because they had audio but no visual. And what a great way to incorporate the visual. And if you do a throwback cartoon, you have me anyway. I mean, that's a given. But the way they did it I thought it was excellent.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, obviously, it goes without saying, we both recommend seeing the movie. It's great. It's very, very informative. And then you're going to learn so much about the man that you wouldn't even think of. And what I love too is that, then it continues with his life as he gotten older. He had some other ideas. Like he had one idea where he wanted to make like a steamboat where people were able to like gamble, but it was like going to be like tropical. But I guess it happened. But then like
storm hit. Kind of unrealistic. It was the Singapore and Hong Kong queens. So
then it talks about like his different wives that he ended up marrying, and I think like there was the one woman who were like, she was more of an outgoing like a character person than he was, and they were saying that it was almost like a marriage out of convenience. It wasn't really like a love.
Well, I mean they do a good job of trying to walk that fine line.
Yeah, and then his last wife, he truly is like, okay, this is like my true love, and and they even have interviews with her too, and it's cool. It's interesting because you see like pictures and footage of Donn as he's gotten older, and
but it also brings the Hawaii years into focus, and I mentioned a little bit of this before, but what the documentary take is that Donn Beach was influential in bringing the Hawaii with taking the Polynesian and the authentic artists of Hawaii in particular to do the luau's for the tourists. And my late grandmother, she used to love going from San Francisco to Hawaii with her girlfriends in her 60s and 70s, and she loved going to like the Sheratons and the Hiltons and the what we would call resorts today and the Hawaiis and that whole thing. And part of it was, a lot of it is sort of kitsch, but the movie says Donn Beach was influential in taking authentic artists, and although bringing some pizzazz to it to appeal to people from the lower 48, but bringing that in there. And that was a really interesting perspective, not one I appreciated. And again, my grandmother was one of those people who would go there and eat that stuff up, and I had always assumed that it was all somewhat kitschy or somewhat false, but what it was saying was Donn Beach brought some integrity to the process and some authenticity to all of that from the 1950s, 60s.
Well, even like a lot of his bartenders, mixologists, they were mostly Filipino, including Ray Buellin.
Yep. The other point that Martin, Kate, and Rebecca in the documentary brought up, which I think is a really good point.
Yes.
This really stuck with me. Martin said that, you got to appreciate the skills that bartenders bring to tiki drinks, because when we talked about Trader Vic's Seattle, remember that? And you had to learn 72 drinks.
Yeah, it was insane.
And the original Donn the Beach, 67 drinks. I mean, unique drinks with all these multi-layers and ingredients. And you had to be able to sling them out quickly on a Friday or Saturday night with the same consistency. And each drink had its own glass at Donn the Beachcomber. And so that's how you knew what drink it was and what to put in the drink, but also the quality control and craftsmanship. And anyway, so the Kate's thing was, and I take this to heart, is, Martin says, I'm a mixologist, but you really got to give credit to the bartenders, because it's the bartenders who are able to sling these drinks, make them consistent. And I really appreciate that, because I'm a very slow bartender and I'm not consistent. I enjoy mixing my own drinks, making my own drinks, my own variation of drinks. So I guess I can call myself a mixologist. That makes me sound pretty fancy. Yeah. But that was I don't know why. That just really stuck with me.
I'll bring this home with a statement. It's like you could say like, well, it was Donn Beach. A bartender, was he a mixologist? But I think we can all agree that he's the godfather of tiki. Want to support the Tiki with Ray show and look cool doing it at the same time? Then head over to tikiwithray.com and buy yourself a Tiki with Ray shirt. They're only $20. Tony Canepa did the design, and they're screen printed in America.